Welcome to the Gut Reset Summit. I am your host, Dr. John Dempster, and I'm thrilled to be joined by Natalie Von Teichman. And not only is Natalie an old friend, Natalie is the founder of MIINDFULLY, which is a brand responsible for creating the very first meditation stuffy for kids that offers a full sensory experience. And she founded MIINDFULLY and created Meditate, known as Tate, the first multi-sensory meditation stuffy that has changed the lives of many children and parents who are looking for toys to support their children's mental, emotional, and social health. And her mission is to utilize this cuddly breathing buddy to connect children and young adults to the power of meditation and mindfulness in a unique way that is easy and fun. And Tate helps children with several preventative strategies such as emotional regulation, understanding the immense power of their breath, sleep support, and how to feel calm. So, Natalie, welcome to the Gut Reset Summit. I'm so excited to have our chat today, but it's great to have you here. Can you tell us, before we dive into all the questions I have for you today, what's your story? I know you've got a great story how you got into all.
Yeah, I know it's crazy. The story. It actually started back like so many things in the land of COVID. And back in sort of, reverse 2020, February 2020, I actually got COVID. I was the 29th person in Canada to have COVID. That's my big claim to fame. And, I was at home. I was locked in my bedroom. That was back when everyone was really freaking out about COVID. And so I was actually locked in my bedroom I say locked because it really felt like locked in my bedroom for 11 days, didn't leave, got pretty sick, like had some pretty good COVID symptoms, and realized through this whole process that I was quite physically fit, but I realized that mentally I wasn't quite as fit as I wanted to be because I found it really challenging to go through that experience. And so through all of this, we have 4 boys, my husband and I. We have 2 boys and then tried to have a girl and got twin boys. And I'm looking at them in the backyard, jumping on the trampoline and running around and doing all the stuff that we were doing locked in our, backyards of our homes. And thought to myself, how can I prepare my children better for when they encounter stressful situations like the one that I had just been through? And we know inevitably that this happens to everybody. So I started doing some research and looked to figure out if there was anything around. I'm a meditation and mindfulness teacher, a yoga teacher, and I'd been doing little things with the boys, with apps and things like that. But I really wanted something that was a little more tangible that could really help them. And I decided to create it myself because I couldn't find it. So what I created was a little toy. It's a little plush toy, like a little plush dog, and it has a Bluetooth speaker inside of it. And when it's connected to the online content that you find on the Mindfully app, it plays different meditation stories, lots of different categories. We do breath work with Tate's Pause. There's an olfactory component because there's an essential oil component. And what I found was that all of a sudden, when we create and we engage all of these different sensory interactions with our kids, it is like they're like little vehicles that help them go inside. And so that's where I've gotten to where I'm now. But one of the things I love the most about what I'm doing now is I'm really, aside from Tate and Mindfully, I'm on this mission to really start talking and creating conversations around mental fitness and how it impacts our children's wellness. And I think we're learning as adults that, all of these things are very important for our health. So I think we need to start bringing this to our children and actually setting them up for success when they're little so that they don't have to sort of backtrack like we did, like we've been trying to do with our mental health journeys.
What a story! And I remember when you were going through all of that recovery from from COVID. It was the talk of the town in Toronto here. That's
Oh, I talked to someone the other day who I hadn't met, but they knew of my name because they heard of me being the first person, like in Toronto for sure, to have COVID. And so, yeah, that's interesting.
So this is so timely, and a lot of people at first might be wondering why we're talking on a gut summit about this. But this is the connection that we're going to draw into today, is that mindfulness is so critically important for not only children, and I do work with a lot of children with gut issues, but also adults and adolescents and so forth. But let's dive into this term, mental fitness. I want to understand, and maybe you can help clarify for the listeners, what is it? And, again, let's draw that back to how that impacts the gut health of our kids.
Yeah, I feel like the term mental health is so, we hear it so much. We hear it all the time, mental health, mental health. And I think, we get a little desensitized to it because we hear it so much. I think there's still a stigma associated with it, which there shouldn't be, but there is. And so what I like to do for parents, I think what's really helpful is to talk about mental fitness. And you can compare this as an equal to like physical fitness. So, we do a lot of physical fitness things with our kids. And so what I'm trying to do is just move this over to, we have an inside body and we have an outside body. And so on our outside body, we practice physical fitness. On our inside body, we practice mental fitness. So this refers to mental agility, mental resilience, mental flexibility. So all of these terms are sort of under that umbrella of mental fitness. And I think the best way to describe it, which I think really helps, is, a little bit of an anatomy lesson here. The autonomic nervous system is broken up into three parts. To keep it super simple, we'll talk about the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system. And the sympathetic nervous system is the part of the brain that's the stress response. So this is the one when our children are running around playing outside, or maybe when they're having a meltdown because someone took their toy away, or whatever it is, they're engaged in that stress response. And sometimes that stress response is good. It doesn't have to be good or bad, but that's the sympathetic nervous system. And then we have the parasympathetic nervous system, and that is our rest and digest part of our brain. So the part of the brain where maybe your child is cuddling with you or napping, or and one thing to mention around gut health is when we're in that sympathetic nervous system, our digestion kind of slows down a little bit. We're not sort of, when we're in a high stress response, our body's not going to start saying, oh, it's time to digest a meal. So this is sort of, our digestion slows down. In the parasympathetic, it speeds up. We're resting, our body is working. And so the reason I bring these 2 points up is that when it comes to children, what's really important, even adults too, is we need to be able to go back and forth between these 2 parts of our nervous system multiple times a day. And that is brain agility. That is brain flexibility. So I was talking to someone the other day and I said, it's like, think about a car. So when we have a car and we have gears in a car, we want to be able to shift our gears in our car from these different gears. We go faster, we go up to gear 5, we go slower, we go back down to gear 1. But we want to make sure that those gears, they move with they're smooth, right? They're not stuck, they're not grinding. We're not getting stuck in gear 5, so we're going a million miles an hour. We're not getting stuck in gear 1 where we're not even moving. And so what do we do in these gears of a car to make them move quickly, is we put like a gear oil on them. I don't know a lot about cars, but we basically put, some sort of an oil, to keep them going. The way I like to compare it with the brain is when we move back and forth between the sympathetic and the parasympathetic, that gear oil, that lubrication that helps us move smoothly is our breath. So we can learn to use our breath to be able, and teach our children to be able to go back and forth with ease. And that is sort of the best way that I like to describe mental fitness, mental agility. There's lots of other things too, talking about feelings, and we'll get to that later. But in its simplest forms, that's how I like to sort of talk about it.
Which is super inspiring, because we as adults are trying to figure out how to achieve this mental fitness, so to speak. How do we do this with our kids? But I find children, they learn quick, and they don't have these obstacles in front of them, like that. We've got these patterns that we might have created over time. I used to host the Mental Wellness Summit, so we've talked a lot about this in previous interviews. But the fact that you're doing this with children, you're so proactive, to me sets the tone for optimal gut function and optimal health. Let's not forget that 80% of our immune system is in our gut. This is going to help us really stave off and reduce and mitigate risk for a lot of problems that we're seeing in society today. So yeah, I'm so blown away by what you're doing there, Nat, and I want to hear more and more about how you're succeeding with your kids, because as you're saying,
Yeah.
how you're talking about mindfulness with your kids. I just imagine my 3 kids running around our house, and it doesn't seem to be very mindful in nature.
Yeah. Well,
So,
like we have 4 boys, as I mentioned, and these are boys who, are really, really busy boys. Our boys are not walking around our house zenned out, like, chill. They're not that. I mean,
Oh, they're not levitating?
oh, they're not levitating
Oh,
yet.
okay.
Yeah.
That's
They're maybe levitating each other on, with someone tied up to a rope and on a mattress flying downstairs or something. That's how they would levitate. So, I mean, this is not, I think what we have to remember when it comes to this whole area around mental fitness in children is that we're just planting the seeds. We're just starting the conversation. So I'm not talking about this for parents to think, oh my gosh, like another thing, or to feel overwhelmed. I think that's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to plant the seeds and talk about this. I talk to parents about this idea that, so I like to think of parenting. We have a lot more pillars, but let's just keep it really simple. We have three pillars. Okay. The first pillar is physical fitness. So we grew up with our parents taking us to physical fitness activities. We went to soccer, we went to baseball, hockey, all this stuff. We were active. They took us to the parks. So we do that with our children very easy. And we spend a lot of time and a lot of money on that. The second is, education. We spend a lot of time and a lot of money on that pillar as well. And that's also very important. But mental fitness, we don't really spend a lot of time or money there. And that's partially because A, we didn't grow up with it. So we have no idea what we're talking about. And B, and that's totally normal, by the way. And B, we just don't know how to teach that to our kids. And so what I kind of liken it to, you wouldn't put your child in, let's say we're Canadians. So you wouldn't put your child in a game, if they'd never had the opportunity to hold a stick or take a puck and shoot into the net. You'd show them, you'd practice first. You'd practice the game so that when it's game time, they would know what they're doing. Same thing with education. You wouldn't give them a test, a spelling test or a fractions test, if they'd never had the opportunity to practice the spelling words or to practice the fractions. But with mental fitness, it seems that everything we're doing is reactive. We wait till the problem. This is what's happened with us right now, is that, we're dealing with all these gut issues. We're dealing with this IBS and Crohn's, all these things, because, what part of all of those emotions that we've swallowed our whole lives that we haven't sort of dealt with or felt have sort of all come up. So in this mental fitness category, we're really reactive. So what I'm trying to say with kids these days is, can we start to make this a little more proactive? So we can, set them up for more success. And with us, we're sort of having to go all the way back to work back from, if it's 1 to 10 and 1 is baseline and 10 is we're really struggling with our gut, we're trying to work back. Well, with kids, can we actually make it so that we give them some of these tools, these mental fitness tools around mindfulness, around, emotions, so that we don't get so far down the road to have to work our way all the way back again?
Absolutely. Yeah, I want to go back to the anatomy just for a quick sec, just to clarify one other very important piece here, is that a big part of our nervous system is our enteric nervous system, which lies in our gut, right? And that was connected back to what you discussed with the ANS. So our sympathetic, which is that fight or flight, and of course the rest and digest, which is the parasympathetic. But the gut nervous system is connected to the central nervous system through this nerve called the vagus nerve. And I know you are an expert in this. And I want to hear a little bit more about the mechanisms here, like how, and then we'll get to the fun stuff. I want to also get some very practical ways to help the kids. But let's talk just again, science-wise for a moment here. What's going on with this vagus nerve and why is it so important?
I mean, the vagus nerve is the largest cranial nerve, right? It goes from our brain to our large intestine. And you're totally right. That's that third part of that autonomic nervous system. What's really important about the vagus nerve is that when we have increased stress hormones, increased inflammation, we're in a situation where we're going to have issues with our gut. That's just the reality of what it is. And so, really, when we engage the vagus nerve, when we're doing a vagal nerve stimulation in whatever form it is, and stimulating your vagus nerve, one of the biggest things we can do is breathe. So exhales longer than inhales. Listening to music can stimulate our vagus nerve. Sometimes humming can stimulate a funny thing, gurgling, like when you gurgle water, that can stimulate the vagus nerve. There's lots of different ways we can do that. when we do that, we actually increase the vagal tone. And when we have increased vagal tone, we have decreased cytokine production. And then all of a sudden, we have this, it actually has been shown to contribute to resiliency. And that takes us right back to that mental fitness term around mental resilience. So I think what's really important to liken that vagus nerve, as that impacts the gut and we have inflammation and we have all of these issues in our gut, when we teach children when they're younger how to stimulate the vagus nerve through mindfulness, through just being calm. We spend all this time, we say to our children, take a deep breath, or relax, or whatever it is, and slow down. Well, children nowadays, they don't even get the opportunity because they are so inundated with so much outside noise, constantly video games and television and all of this stuff. It's always coming at them. So how do we start to create ways that we can start stimulating that vagus nerve? When we stimulate that vagus nerve, like you mentioned before, the enteric nervous system, the parasympathetic nervous system, we start to engage. And so when we do this when they're young, this will start creating different neural pathways in the brain, right? So we start actually the talk, we say to our kids, calm down. Well, what does it feel like? I think it's having a conversation around words versus feelings. And what does it feel like to feel calm versus just say it or hear it? So that's, I think, a really important part of why we want to teach children this, to ultimately impact that vagus nerve, which ultimately has a direct impact on the gut as it relates to, inflammation, the microbiome. These are all very important things.
And I'm glad you bring that up. And I'm sure you've seen the recent research on this, but there's a study that just came out that shows that if you've gone through any significant trauma, and let's face it, trauma can be very relative. It doesn't have to be, the worst case scenario that we can all think of, but any traumatic event can significantly impact your microbiome within 24 hours. And again, just to clarify, the microbiome is that collection of all of these bacteria, yeast, and even parasites. It's this microbiological foray that has a huge impact on our mental health and our immune health and everything else. Significant amounts of our neurotransmitters are produced there. So this is fascinating. If our children are going through, and they're learning, but they're also going through very stressful times. And I'm literally, Nat, I'm thinking of yesterday. My eldest daughter had her school play. She was very well rehearsed for this. But she had an hour leading up to it. She had a massive amount of, fear and anxiety, which is very normal, but to the point where she didn't want to go on stage. And this is, it's heartbreaking for parents to watch this. But all we did is we said, honey, breathe. And she did some deep breaths, and she found her, in her inner wherewithal, and she got up and she did it, and it was fantastic. But our children, they're going through these challenges every day, and sadly some children are going through some significant trauma. And I know you've spent time doing crisis management for kids, so, and we'll get into some case studies here in a moment, but this is so important. And I'm just constantly thinking of the science of the neuroplasticity, which is these patterns that get formed in our brain and our nervous tissue, and it all starts from such a young age. So it's so important.
It is everything that we experience as children, ultimately we carry with us, and so I think it's we don't often sit back and take that moment to think about, they say, oh, when they're little, everything's developing. Well, what does that mean? And what is that going to do to them? I think that we also are living in a world where, everything is forest fires. Kids have got so much coming on them. Anxiety. I really think that a lot of the social media, a lot of the being in front of screens so much is really affecting children's anxiety. But, as it relates, as we take it back to gut health, it's all related. Everything is related. It's exactly with what you do with your practice. We know in functional medicine, it's really, everything is tied together. So if we can start when they're little, you mentioned something about your daughter. The other day, our boys were playing in the basement, and they were playing mini sticks. And one of my twins happened to walk into my eldest son, who's, 13, but has size 11 feet and is massive, happened to walk into his backswing of his mini stick shot and took a mini stick, plastic stick right off the head. And, you hear the scream. There's two types of screams. The one scream is like, oh, they're fine. And especially, in our house, we hear those, and I'm like, you're fine. Then there's other ones that you need to go to.
Yeah.
And as I'm going down the stairs and he comes around the corner, and the goosebump is like the ones you see in cartoons, like, back in the day when they would like start growing out. I'm realizing that I need to be calm. I need to, because they can tell by your eyes, right? And so I bring him up to the couch and we sit down, and I'm looking at him, and all these things are going through my head, all these things. And this is traumatic for him. This is an
Mhm.
experience. These are things that are molding our children, right? And so I'm thinking to myself, oh my gosh, in my head, is it concussion protocol? Does he have a concussion? Are we like, is he going to pass out? Like all the things that go through the head of a parent when you see your child really injured. And what's very interesting is that because we've been practicing in our house about the power of your breath, as we're sitting there and I'm going to get ice, all of a sudden my 8-year-old started taking these big deep breaths in, just closed his eyes and exhaled and inhaled and exhaled. And all of a sudden it reminded me as a parent to regulate my breathing. So we can learn from our children. We really can. And to see him, and what's really neat about that is all of a sudden, he's seeing how that helps him. Oh, I'm still in pain, but I can process this pain. And there was a study out of UCLA by a woman named Lonnie Zeltzer, and she was looking at pain perception in children. And what she found was that guided imagery, and we can talk about this later, but just as a side note, when I was thinking about pain, that using breathwork techniques and using guided imagery and using guided like meditation can actually have, for short periods of time, a similar effect to pharmaceutical interventions like morphine. So, giving our kids these tools are invaluable as they grow older.
Oh, no doubt. Absolutely. And so, I'd love to hear a little bit more of how you actually teach your kids. I think this is important. How do we communicate this? Because sometimes, I don't know what it's like in your house, but sometimes it's just like, oh, it sounds like work. And the kids, unless it's really fun, how do they embrace that? And how do
Yeah.
they take that on?
Yeah, I think some of it too is, we have to have a commitment that we believe in this and that we see that this will make a difference. But I can tell you that when you see as a parent that it makes a difference, and then your child sees it,
For sure.
it blows your mind, because all of a sudden it's like you talk to people who say, oh, I didn't meditate, but then I started meditating and it really was amazing. Like when we see things that work, you have to shout it to the world. And that's why I'm doing this right now. Having 4 kids, having a husband who's really busy working, I never set out to start a business this way. But when I saw how it was impacting my children, and then when I heard from other people how it was impacting, I was like, I need to just keep going because this is just really amazing. So, one of the things that's really important is talking about feelings. And so we talk about feelings. I just finished Will Cole's book the other day, his gut feelings book, which was amazing. And we talk about feelings as being things that we ingest, things that we put into our body, right? We think it in our gut, we think it in our brain. It's part of us. And so how do we talk to our kids about feelings? And one thing that I always like to say is that, first of all, there's no good feelings and there's no bad feelings. Feelings are feelings. And some of them might make us feel a little more uncomfortable, but they're not bad. And so I speak to our children about feelings like visitors in your house. So sometimes you have a play date, and the play date comes over to your house and they knock on the door and they come in, and they are the most fun play date ever. And you share your toys and everything is so fun and you feel so good. Your brain feels good. Your gut feels good. You have no issues. Everything's great. Other times you have playdates come over and they knock on the door and they bust through your house and they want to play with your favorite toy, or they always get the snack first. And all you're thinking is, oh my gosh, I cannot wait for this playdate to go away. So what we have to realize is that playdates don't live in our house. They come and then they go home,
Mhm.
just like feelings. So feelings don't live in us all the time. They come and go, just like visitors do in our home. And I also like to talk about even comparing feelings to the ocean. So I always say to children, have you ever seen an ocean that's totally not moving, that's completely stagnant? It just doesn't happen. So feelings are like the waves that come in the ocean. And some waves are really, really big and they plow you over. And it can be a little uncomfortable. but we learn to get back up again. Other waves are really small and they just kind of tickle our legs and keep going. But all waves come and wash out again, just like feelings. And, I think as we talk about our feelings and we talk about how they feel in our body and that they come in and then they leave, that is something that children will help creating those neural pathways throughout the body to help them understand that this is how we process feelings more.
Awesome. Amazing. Can you share a couple of real life examples? I know you've probably got many, but working with kids on all angles, tell us a
Mhm.
few stories that stand out for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think as we've talked about earlier, breath work's important. Breath work stimulating parasympathetic nervous system being connected to vagus nerve being connected to the brain, the gut, all of these things. It's all intertwined. An interesting example is I'm going to say one about my son first, because this one I really think is very interesting. So I have a couple, but I'll stick to the one about the gut here. So when we fly, our one son gets very sick on planes. He gets really crumpled up tummy, feels really nervous, feels sick to his stomach. It's just kind of a thing that he deals with. But as he's gotten older, he started to grow out of it just a little bit. But it's still his story. So it's still something that he sort of has been carrying with him. And recently we went away, we took a flight, and we brought our little puppy Tate with us. And we brought Tate on the plane. And we sat down, and right away he said to me, "Mom, I think I'm going to be sick when we fly. I think I'm just going to, like, that's, I'm going to throw up. My stomach's going to get upset. It's going to be awful." And I said to him, "Dax, what do you think about maybe putting on one of those neck things, the neck things they put on the plane, putting your headphones on, and we'll put on a meditation." And the reason I wanted to do this is that we know that when children or adults have an anchor for their brain to focus on, they start to kind of forget about some of the other stuff. So some things can be psychosomatic. And that whole stimulation of the vagus nerve, we talked earlier about music, about humming, about, your exhales being longer than your inhales. So we put this meditation on and he started listening.
Mm.
We took off and he didn't sleep. He stared straight down and he listened to the meditation. He listened to the music. He really engaged his parasympathetic. He was stimulating his vagus nerve. We listened to the first meditation. It finished. He asked for another one. We listened to the second. At the end of the second, I looked at him and I said, "The plane's landing." And he was he was completely blown away. And he looked at me and he said, "Mom, my tummy didn't even hurt once. It didn't hurt at all." And so all of a sudden we're refocusing, right? So meditation and mindfulness isn't about this idea of like being completely void of thought, because the reality is being completely void of thought is the same thing as like waking up in the morning and telling your heart to start or stop beating. We can't stop thoughts from coming in and out of our brain, and neither can our children. They're going to come. But it's all about how do we refocus? How do we refocus? And asking our brain to stop thinking is the same thing as asking our heart to starting or stopping beating. It's not possible. So when we refocus and we do these things like give our children these anchors or these tools, their breath, the music, the guided imagery, all of a sudden they're not focusing on these other things. And from a biological, from the standpoint of talking about what we did earlier, the vagus nerve, that's vagal nerve stimulation. So when we're doing that, we're increasing vagal tone. And so that all of these things for him, as he gets older, oh, these are tools, these are things that I can do when I fly, as example.
Nat, I know some adults that could benefit from Tate.
There's going to be lots of adults with puppies on the plane.
And just to clarify, when we say puppies, we're talking about the stuffy. But
Totally. Even another example, Johnny, the other day, when I say the other day, I say that my kids always say to me, "Mom, you say the other day," and it was like 4 months ago. And I'm like, I know. Okay. So it was about 3 months ago. We were in the Bahamas and we took a family trip. And this is where the physical fitness and the mental fitness kind of comes in and overlaps here. So we were at one of these water parks that had these ginormous water slides, and 2 of the water slides were really huge and really scary. So 3 of our 4 boys were running up and flying down these slides like nobody's business. One of my boys came up and said, "Mom, I am so scared, but I want to do this so badly. I so badly want to do it. And he said, my outside body, on the outside, I know that it's safe because other people are doing it. I'm watching it. It seems okay. But inside, I'm terrified. I'm so scared and I don't know what to do. And I said to him, well, what helps you when your inside body is nervous? And right away, because we do this, deep breaths help. So I said, okay, why don't we try doing some deep breaths while we walk up the 7 million flights of stairs to the top of this, water slide. So we get up to the top and he's doing his deep breaths and I'm doing them with him. As a parent, one thing that's really helpful with your kids when they're panicking is you can either rub their back, inhale on the way up, exhale on the way down. So if we regulate our breathing, our child will actually automatically start to regulate with us. It's sort of like a wave. Anyways, we get to the top, we're waiting. This one water slide is such that you go into a capsule, the door closes, there's a heartbeat going, and it calls 3, 2, 1, and the floor goes out below you. You fly down, spin through a tunnel, and come out the other end. Like, super fun. So anyways, he looks at me and he says, Mom, I'm ready. So he gets in this capsule, the door closes. Once the door closes, you're not getting out. The guy who's running the slide looks at me and says, what is he doing? And he's standing there and he's breathing. He's just breathing. He's 8, John. He's 8. And so the thing goes 3, 2, 1. His little hair goes shoo, and he flies down, goes to the bottom. I now have promised him that I have to do this as well. So I'm doing my deep breaths. As I'm shimmering, I decided to go down the straight down one. So I'm shimmering until my body weight finally pushes me over and I fly straight down the slide. I get to the bottom. You've never seen a happier child in your life with the biggest smile. And he said, Mom, I did it. I did it. And I said to him, what do you think it was? And he said, my deep breaths. So all of a sudden, the reason I bring this example up, we spend a lot of time congratulating our children on the goal they got in soccer, on the home run they scored in baseball, on the test they got in math, which is really important. We need to congratulate our kids for this. But when they do something that really shows mental agility or mental fitness or mental strength, and we congratulate them, we're giving them positive reinforcement for that. Then next time when they're in a situation where maybe they have really bad stomach pain or really they're nervous about something, the more they use it, the more they can go to that place. So it's a skill.
And that's it. You're teaching them skills that are going to pay it forward their entire life. And this is why this is such an important talk. Is there anything else we need to know about mental fitness and gut health and helping our children going forward?
I think that the biggest thing is really being conscious about starting to educate ourselves and talk more about this. So there's a new category of toys that's coming out, even from a retail standpoint, where they used to have STEM toys, which are, toys about math and STEM is like science, technology, engineering, and math. Now there's a new category of toys coming out called mesh, and these are mental, emotional, and social health toys. So these, even the toy industry is recognizing that we need to create things that are going to support our children's mental fitness, our children's mental health. And I think you're going to start seeing a shift. I mean, John, you guys were talking all about how many years ago were we not even talking about the gut brain connection? I mean,
Yeah.
not at all. You look at books like what Dr. Cole just put out. I mean, I think we're in a really cool spot right now that we can really impact this next generation in the most beautiful of way. Sometimes it's slow for us, right? Things can be a slow burn. But if we start having these conversations, if we start doing these things with our children, they will do it with their children. So, it may not be glaring at us right away, but I guarantee that if we start and we help them understand it, they will pass this on. And we talk about generational trauma, right? That's a whole other topic. But we talk about that and we see that this is happening. So if we want to make a difference in this world with our wellness, with everything, if we start talking about this topic more and more with our kids, they will pass it on because they will see how it impacts them. And I think that's a really important point.
And that's a great way to end off. And, such a powerful amount of tips and tools and takeaways, I think, in this talk, Nat. So thank you again for sharing your wisdom. And thanks for everything that you're doing with Mindfully and Meditate. And I hope to see more stuffies on airplanes going forward. But Nat, before we hop, where do the listeners find you online? How do we learn more?
Yeah, you can find me. My email is you can find us at www.mindfully.com. So it's MIINDFULLY. We're on social media. Everything is at Mindfully Meditate. So just same mindfully spelled with 2 I's again. And you can always reach out. I love engaging with people. I'm really interested in this topic of gut health and how it relates to our children's overall wellness. I'm fascinated with it. And so I would love to connect with people around this topic as well, because I know from an adult standpoint, we're there, but we're just getting there with kids, and I'm fascinated. So would love to talk about that more. So please reach out.
I love it. Thanks again, Nat. Really appreciate you hopping on today.
Thank you. And thank you for having me. By you having people like me on, it really helps elevate this conversation. So thank you too.
You're very welcome. Take care.